Sign up to The Economist for in-depth curated expert analysis of world events and topics ranging from business and culture to science and technology. You'll get the weekly digital edition, online-only articles, curated newsletters on politics, the markets, science, culture and China, and full access to The Economist Podcast Plus. The Economist is independent journalism for independent thinking. Go to economist.com and get your first month free.
Savaged, unfiltered.
All right, guys, today we are joined by Noah Healy, a recreational mathematician, as well as many practices in his passions. Guys, let's bring on Noah. Noah, tell us a little bit about yourself, buddy.
That's not a line of work. That's a line of fun, really. So the difference between a professional mathematician and a recreational one is motive, not activity. The professional mathematicians generally teach as well as study, and I get away with just studying, and so that's the fun. My area of interest, each recreational mathematician sort of has their own specialty. My area of interest is computational mathematics. So what I like to do is collect new techniques for efficiently achieving process and think about how to bring these techniques together and create new ones. And that play in the space of communication and information is where this marketplace that I'm working on came out of.
Oh, wow. Yeah. See, I wasn't quite familiar on how it works. I've heard bits and pieces of, other people, in that field, if I may say that. I just wasn't familiar on how that works. It sounds quite interesting. I did mention that you go into a superior form, for the marketplace, and you're trying to use that to upgrade the economy. Did you want to dig into a little bit of that? Because I kind of found
yes, absolutely. So my system is based on a wisdom of crowds notion. So at the core, an economy involves everybody getting the most of what they can get based on what everybody else wants. And so that's why knowledge and voluntary behavior is so critical to that, because sort of warfare would draw down the globalized average, if you will. And so all of the information about how to operate an economy properly is resident in the brains of the people in that economy, effectively by definition. The problem is that if you just ask people what they're doing and what they want, they'll lie to you, because there's a lot of advantage to deceiving other people about what's going on. And so a marketplace essentially asks people to put their money where their mouth is to get honest signaling. And what my marketplace does is gets that money where their mouth is step performed in a way that directly measures the information in what their claims are, using the techniques that have been developed for mass communication and telephony and so on. And so I can create much higher quality signals from people and then integrate them together in a much less expensive fashion.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds rather interesting, especially in today's time we're facing, a very challenged economy. Um, do you see it challenging way as I see it, or do you see it in an entirely different approach?
Yeah, the current economic problems have so many causes that it's almost pointless to enumerate them. But what I see as a more fundamental problem is that markets themselves have become more expensive, and effectively everybody knows this, but we don't really acknowledge just how dangerous that is. Um, in in the wake of the last time we had mass inflation in the 70s, the financial sector very nearly collapsed. And since the 80s, and this is both easily verifiable through government statistics, but also, in pop culture and the role that Wall Street now plays in our day-to-day lives. Uh, the fraction of the economy that is being used to operate the financial system has just grown and grown with the introduction of computer technology. And in fact, what we would want to see from a service economy would be it becoming cheaper over time, and effectively, what computers have done has allowed the industry as a whole to grow, and that growth is undermining the capacity of the rest of the economy.
Yeah, you mentioned some really good valuable points, with inflation. We're seeing inflation pretty much at historic highs, right? We haven't seen this since you mentioned the 70s, but I think it goes back even further before the 70s. I mean, we haven't really seen this type of, high market since probably like the 50s or 60s. And
Uh,
that's
yeah,
my
that's
I could be
no,
challenged on that, but yes.
that is absolutely the case. The degree of interconnectedness of various regional markets has only increased since the global financial crisis, and the various governments of the world all agreeing to sort of simultaneously weaken their currencies, which has shielded us from a lot of the inflation that has been produced over the last decade plus at this point. Um, and so now that that's breaking loose, we are seeing it effectively all over the place. The the euro broke through the psychological barrier of being worth less than a dollar. Um, uh, China is dealing with mass internal issues with their property markets. There are reports of 50 and 70% revenue hits from their property developers, which is the core of their economy. And of course, we're seeing inflation hit new heights. And again, depending on which statistics you decide to look at, it's either uh, the 70s or the 30s that you'd have to go back to see similar inflationary events
Right,
occur.
right.
So
No,
there's
yeah,
not, like I have bad knees, and I'm fortunate that it's very rare for both of my legs to go out at once. And so, if you're in that kind of position, you can sort of walk on one leg. If Asia goes down and America's strong, then the economy can kind of limp along. But we're seeing simultaneous problems in Europe, Asia, and North America. Um, will Africa South America and India be able to toddle forward? I don't know the answer to that question.
Hey guys, if you're looking for a steak, I know it's hard to find steak, right? You know, a lot of restaurants that just overcooked, undercooked, just not to your taste buds, right? You want that juicy steak. Look no further than Omaha Steak. I love them, guys. Love them. If I didn't love them, why wouldn't I be promoting them on the podcast today? Go over to Omaha Steaks, okay? They are phenomenal, guys. The juiciest steak you'll ever taste in your life, okay? A lot of people are like, well, how does it get delivered to your house? You know, with gnats and bugs going to get into it. And no. It's not, you don't have to worry about all that. It is in a sealed, perishable bag delivered to your house. So you don't have to worry about the gnats and the bugs get into it. It's fresh from the time they ship it from their distribution center to the time it arrives at your house. The juiciest steak you'll ever have in your life, guys. Check them out today. Omaha Steaks. Love them. They're phenomenal.
Unfiltered.
Hello again.
Yeah, how are you doing? Sorry about that. We had a power outage here. We had some bad storms, thunderstorms roll by the area, but everything should be back in order right now. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was afraid it might have been on my end.
Yeah, see, that's what happens. You know, the technology's great today, but you know, it doesn't work when you have bad thunderstorms.
Yeah. Well, you're in Florida, and it's hurricane season. You know, the weather can be bad all sorts of different ways down there.
Yeah. So we're gonna dig back into what you were saying, if you can remember, on the segment we were just in. I think you were talking about the inflation with different types of differences with the UK as well as the US. It's not only affecting the US, but it was also affecting China with their currency and everything else. Go ahead, sir.
So, yeah, as I was saying, the Chinese are in the middle of a banking crisis, which is perhaps unsurprising when you realize that the $1 trillion deficits that we've been running on a pretty much annual basis, although we're a little up from that since COVID, they've been running multi-trillion-dollar deficits in a smaller economy over that same time scale. And of course, the economy of all of Europe is larger, but they have also been running in the neighborhood of $1 trillion deficits on an annual basis over the last decade plus. So
this is not just a U.S. problem. This is basically like a world problem. You're saying, the U.K. experienced high amounts of deficit with their currency, with their economy. At first, I thought this was only a U.S. problem. Compared to the two presidencies that we've had, between Trump and now Biden, I thought it was more of a presidential issue. Between negotiations and stuff like that.
I would not want to exonerate any particular person or group. There's been a lot of bad behavior as well.
Sure.
If you think about, say, the mortgage-backed securities crisis, the fundamental problem was that by creating this brand new credit system, the amount of money that was available to buy real estate was vastly larger than the amount of money that would have went to that if people actually had to come up with the cash themselves. And so
Sure.
Real estate valuations spiked, and since the underlying engine of that credit system was based on what the value of the real estate looked like, that essentially put everything into turbo drive, where the faster it went, the faster it could go. That's not the first time that happened. During Japan's post-war boom, peaking out by the late 80s, early 90s, the city of Tokyo's land assessment value was greater than the 48 contiguous states of the United States. So, in theory, you could sell the city of Tokyo and buy every state except for Alaska and Hawaii and have a little bit left over. That, of course, is ridiculous. It's insane. That didn't happen. But the Japanese economy believed that it did, and they've had a very hard time growing since then, because that's what they sort of built themselves into. Now, in the process of building themselves into that, there were individuals that were running scams or doing things that weren't a good idea. And in the same way with our mortgage-backed securities, which we didn't spin out to quite that extreme extent, the same kind of thing happened. I saw an interview with Tim Dillon on some other comedian's podcast, where Dillon, before he was a comedian, actually sold mortgage-backed securities, and he described the process of how that sales process worked, and it was an open scam. Like, he and the bosses, the people he was working with.
I've seen that that podcast episode actually myself, and I found that quite interesting. Where exactly.
So Tim Dillon didn't cause the global financial crisis. That was caused by doing this thing that was structurally broken. But he also didn't do nothing either. He was behaving badly in that situation, and harms were caused as a result of those things.
If I may, sir, we're on the topic of inflation, and I've always asked this question, whether it's, with myself here on the show or just any other guest I have. Inflation to me is a very interesting topic, because I look at it at all different angles. With the inflation that it is right now, do you think that it could have been avoidable? Do you think some of even the stimulus, checks that had went out in the last couple of years, do you think that could have been a big role towards this inflation crisis that we're in right now, or do you don't think that role?
It certainly did contribute.
However, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
However, the difficulty with the inflation crisis that we're experiencing is that our financial system is actually dependent on continuous inflation for its operation. And as a result of that, we've had inflation for decades. The thing that's really causing us to become quite worried now is that inflation has broken out of the little sort of asset walled garden that it was in, where it was just jacking up stock prices, and people were fundamentally okay with stock prices getting jacked up.
Right. You're right about inflation. We've had inflation, for a long time. But what I'm talking about is, with the inflation that we're experiencing right now, we haven't seen this type or form of inflation. This is very new. I mean, you have inflation that's usually like between 1% to 2%, under any U.S. presidential administration. That's normal. I get that. But we're seeing inflation, sir, at 40, 50, 60-year highs that we haven't seen since the Carter administration, or even going back towards Nixon. This is something that we're not used to.
Right. The point I would like to make is that, we've become quite concerned now that inflation is in the consumer sector. the inflationary actions were actually that high. It's just that they were happening in notional asset values. The actual value of the stock market isn't as high as we generally believe it to be, because large amounts of that free money that was being deficit spent in to support the marketplace itself was going there. What we're now seeing is, rather than having our leading companies be overvalued, we are also having that inflation spread out into the consumer space. That gets down to these sort of fundamental issues. The problem that you're experiencing and the problem that you're having aren't really the same thing. And while we do need to solve the problem that people are experiencing, because as food and fuel and rent prices get very high, it will push people to the wall and cause stressors that
Oh yes,
will kill
absolutely.
people.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing, from the crisis that we're facing right now in the country. I talk to many people, friends up north, friends in California, all over the country. Even some friends that have their own shows, podcasts, and YouTube and stuff like that. They say that this inflation is causing more harm in the country. And I could see that, with the rising, housing, the rents, the mortgages, as simple down as, you mentioned groceries and, gas prices. Do you see this turning around? Because I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting into this topic. I wanted to get into your game theory, and also I've noticed that you had developed a patent pending system, which I hope we have some time to get into that. Do you see, this inflation causing more homeless and more interest rates with the marketplace itself?
Yeah, I'd imagine that it would. The driving forces of this action aren't going anywhere, and the government isn't slowing down its deficit spending in any particular way, and the price normalization hasn't flowed through the system yet. So unless the extra money that's been produced can be removed from the system, it will eventually have to raise the level to its normality level, wherever that is. Since we're looking at, like I said, about 14 years at this point of 5 to 10% of the economy being the pure result of inflation. What's actually happened over the last decade is that the economy has actually been in contraction. We've just had government spending and credit creation to lie to ourselves that we managed to get past the issue of lying to ourselves about how valuable homes are.
Right. Well, here's the thing. I talk about inflation a lot on my show. Since it's a very kind of trending type of topic now.
It's obviously topical. Yes.
Yes, it is topical, but I get a lot of comments coming in, even on social media, and then throughout the shows that I talk, on inflation, saying it is a possibly an administration issue, between Biden and Trump, and you could look at it like that, where Biden is obviously it's a different administration, the negotiation skills, in my own personal opinion, are not there as it once was possibly under Trump. Trump pretty much ran this country as if it was a business. And I think that was the first time in a long time that this country was ran as a business, more or less as a governmental, administration form of a government. But, do you think that, with Trump running, like I mentioned, this country as a business for 4 years, do you think that it controlled the inflation level then than what Biden is running our country now? With more as a presidential, kind of, governmental system.
Savage, unfiltered.
So I was actually at a conference a few years ago, as president, on the agricultural commodity futures, and the keynote speaker at the conference was our head negotiator with China. And so this guy's a lifer. He'd been there for multiple administrations, probably all the way back to the Clinton administration based on his age. And his comment was that he had never worked for anyone that could create leverage the way that Donald Trump could. And so there's definitely that kind of presence. And from a purely selfish point of view, which is, I think, a pretty valid way to think about things in many cases, solving our problems, or at least diminishing our pain, is valuable. But again, I see this as more of a situation of a dam breaking, where we've all kind of been neglecting it and piling up stuff behind the dam for multiple administrations. This deficit spending reaction to the last major financial crisis started under the Bush administration, was continued without pause under the Obama administration, was continued without pause under the Trump administration. And then the COVID crisis, if anything, expanded it. Now, the Biden administration appears to have expanded things even further, which might be what opened up the crack in the dam. But that issue is a much bigger, and as I said, a much more global one.
Right.
And not one, sadly, that I see the current administration responding to in any way that looks productive to me. So that I can say without fear of contradiction.
Yeah. I want to make some room here before we close it out, because we got into a topic right now that I touch on extremely, a lot on my show. And, inflation is, everybody wants to know, like where is our country going, with this current problem that we're in. We're facing, issue after issue. I mean, we seem to be getting into, pandemic after pandemic, and the questions that come across to Washington, it seems that there's no answers to those questions from the general public of this country. And I wanted to get into, before we close it out, I want to get into your patent and pending system. Now that has a lot to do with your technique, if I'm assuming correctly, to this economy.
Yeah. So
do you have any? Go ahead, sir.
The reason that's patent pending is that the patent office has gone really full Kafka at this point. So the patent was actually accepted at this point 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
They acknowledged that it was useful. They acknowledged that there's no prior art of any description. Nobody's ever really come up with a way to innovate in market space the way I have. But then the quality control department
And why
put
do
in
you
the
think?
kibosh.
Yeah, why do you think it's like that, sir? You said it.
Well, let me get to the really crazy part first. So this is 2 years ago. They've given me the acceptance. They've withdrawn the acceptance. That's a thing that does happen. It's rare. But they didn't really do it procedurally the way it would normally happen. My examiner's supervisor called my attorney informally and told him that it was going to be withdrawn. Eventually, they came up with their reasoning for why they couldn't accept the patent. And that reasoning, when examined mathematically, was a claim by the U.S. federal government that 1 equaled 2. I found a paper on algorithmic analysis that's actually hosted on the National Institute of Standards and Technology that describes the how 1 and 2 are different in the context that was important, and we wrote a very strongly worded rebuttal of that claim, which they ultimately accepted. And so in February of this year, the patent was reaccepted. Well, several weeks after that, the reacceptance was re-rejected, and my examiner and his supervisor explained that they couldn't understand the reasons being given by the QC department. And so they basically just repeated the last one.
If it's me, if I may add, it almost sounds as the first kind of merry-go-round with this thing here. It sounds more as a political agenda. Why they didn't approve it the first time around. Does it sound the same way to you, sir?
I did open a case with my congressional office to try to explore a little bit more of what's going on, and the caseworker, when I sort of described the circumstances and what I was working on, her sort of initial response was, "Well, powerful people do have interests." So yes, you're not alone. I don't know what's going on. Basically, they're not communicating with me anymore, so I can't do anything with that.
I could say the same thing. I mean, I'm a former, as you probably can hear in my voice, I'm a former New Yorker. I grew up in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and dealing with politics up there, and dealing with whether it's federal or local level of a government, it's extremely hard. And I've noticed that. I have some friends in the private sector, and I have some friends that work for on both a federal and a local level, and they tell me, dealing with Washington up there, or dealing with the state level, is extremely hard. And I know you happen to reside up in Virginia, and it's if it's difficult. It's difficult, and I can tell you, living here now in Florida, everything is a lot smoother. I've noticed, and people are like, well, Michael, you don't live in the Sunshine State, you live in the Freedom State. And I'm like, oh, yeah, a lot of people are calling that now, due to Ron DeSantis changing the landscape of politics here in Florida, which is great, but, like this pending system, do you feel that it's going to make impact on our economy? I don't know what phase you're in it with it, but do you see it making a large impact or affecting the economy?
Absolutely. So let me start with the phase question. There are currently 4 projects, really all of them outside the United States, that are building up to try to integrate my technology and get it in front of a customer base. But to give a sense of what's sort of going on here, the U.S. economy is in the lower 20 trillions of dollars, and over the last sort of generation, the long-term growth rate of the U.S. economy has been about 2%. So somewhere between $400 and $500 billion a year is how much the economy grows sort of smoothed out average.
Yeah. So pretty much everything Biden's saying right now is a complete lie. I mean, obviously we know that the economy has jumped 40% in the last 3 or 4 months. I mean, I laugh at that sometimes. I'm like, what statistics are they using?
The current overhead costs of the existing system are $800 billion. And that comes straight off potential. That's what's known as a deadweight loss in economics. So my system could reduce that cost by 50, 90, or even more percentage, which would, if you took that and added it on, would effectively double the growth rate of the American economy.
Oh, wow. Wow. Do other people or organizations or people that you may have worked with or even the general public, do they have any type of knowledge that this could work?
They do not. One of the reasons I'm doing podcasting is to try to create general knowledge of the fact that there's something this consequential that's actually available and possible.
I think you're onto something there, Mr. Healy. I mean, this sounds fascinating where, not only can it play a big part on our economy, but it may be the answer to fix all of this,
So I would caution you. I believe that the scope of the problem that we're presently in requires more than doubling human wealth. And this really only has the potential to do that. I think we're at a point now where somewhere between a 3- and 5-fold increase in general wealth is necessary, which is, I'd expect, the reason why governments are behaving so irrationally to attempt to lie about how much wealth actually exists. But I can't see how it could hurt to double human wealth.
Well, I mean, it could play a good, benefit on it. Yeah.
Yeah, it would help out. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, it would help out. I love to dig more into this, but I'm kind of losing time here because I have another appearance I got to make on a show. Actually, I wish I had more time with you, and I hope to have you back on the show because I'd love to get more into this patent system that you have developed. Because it sounds quite fascinating.
Yeah, great. That would be fine for me too. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm going to set up something in the near future because I think the audience and my listeners they'd love to hear more about this because this is something that is that is fresh that I've never heard of and possibly not only the nation but the world has never heard of yet. And I think you're onto something here, and it sounds very special. And I love to hear more about your ideas and where you want to bring them to.
Yes. I'd love to talk to you about that stuff. That's
really
what's gotten me into podcasting in the first place.
Yeah. The same thing with myself too. Noah, for the listeners that may be listening to this, and people that are not aware of your work and what you do, where can they find you at?
So there's a website that I have called coordisc.com. That's COORDISC, where you can learn more about me and this idea. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the Noah Healy on there, and you could reach out to me through my email, noahphealy@yahoo.com.
Great stuff. Noah, like I said, I hope we're not going to be a stranger here in the future. I'd love to bring you back on as a part 2 of this podcast episode to learn more about this system that you have developed. Noah, it's been great talking to you on this episode, and like I said, let's not be strangers, and I hope to have you back on my show in the near future, sir.
Sounds great to me.
All right. Take it easy, sir.
Alrighty, guys. You just heard the voice of Noah Healy, recreational mathematician, as well as other practices and his passions. We're going to invite Noah for part 2 of this episode in the near future. I highly suggest you tune into the final episode of this great conversation I had with Noah.